Hello, my name is Suhyun Yang, and today I'll be talking about how I use Conc to analyze F. Scott Fitzgerald's works and find consistent usage of hair color. Do writers write in a consistent and fixed pattern? Do they have a preferred choice of writing style or keywords? This is a question we must ask when reading literary works of renowned authors. Writers do not write without reason. There are motivations that are either external or that come from innate personalities. So the works of the writers consist of the mind, moral standards, values of the writer, only depicted in relatively indirect ways. But what if we can find a pattern and get somewhat closer to what the author is trying to say? This will give us the opportunity to get a glimpse of how we can convey the writer's view of looking at the world to other languages, cultural backgrounds, and even the future readers of the work. This kind of research will also be helpful when producing translations that send a more exact message of the work. So, before looking into his works, let's see how Fitzgerald was judged by other critics to get an understanding of what kind of person he was. The main critic of Fitzgerald is Edmund Wilson. He depicts him as handsome, dissolute, and rather uneasy. And his manner alternates between too much and too little assurance, but there is something disarmingly childlike about his egoism. He exhibits in his personality as well as in his writings a quality rare today among even the youngest American writers. He is almost the only one among them who is capable of light-hearted high spirits. So now let's look at how his initial and lastly published works were produced and if it does relate to his life events. By comparing his life to his works he produced during his life events, this judgment can be seen as pretty much accurate. Francis Scott Keith Fitzgerald was born in St. Paul, Minnesota to Edward and Mary Fitzgerald. Fitzgerald's father later takes a job and moves his family to New York. Fitzgerald enters Princeton University and writes for the Princeton Tiger, the school's on humor magazine. At Princeton, he becomes a leading figure in literary life, but eventually flunks out. Although he returns to Princeton, he leaves again to join the Army. During the summer of 1918, he is stationed near Montgomery, Alabama, and meets Zelda Zaire, a daughter of an Alabama Supreme Court judge. They become engaged, but his lack of financial stability becomes an issue. Fitzgerald moves to New York City and has a job in an advertising agency, making little money. He works there for several months. After Zelda breaks off their engagement, he returns to St. Paul and works on a novel that he had been writing during his time in the Army. This novel is This Side of Paradise. In 1920, The Side of Paradise is published. The novel brings him fame and money, and he eventually marries Zelda in April. This Side of Paradise is about a rich boy called Amory Blaine. He's spoiled with a huge ego and with a shallow knowledge about the world. However, through his life events and love affairs, he discovers his purpose of his life. By the setting that he also goes to Princeton and attends the army with a high ego, he can be seen as Fitzgerald himself. After this book, he leaves for France with his daughter Frances. Fitzgerald completes his masterpiece, The Great Gatsby. After the success of his book, he writes several brilliant short stories. However, there is an 8-year gap between his next novel. During the 8 years, Fitzgerald and Zelda suffer from alcohol and mental illnesses. His last completed novel, Tender as Night, is mostly based on the couple's hard time in their relationship. So, like his themes of his novels that he started with and ended with are pretty much very similar. However, he needed a writing tactic that wouldn't bore his audience. He depicts this writing tactic as holding his breath. In a letter to his daughter, he says, "All good writing is swimming underwater and holding your breath." The writer should hold his breath to persuade the readers into feeling his intentions of the work, but not showing it directly. Fitzgerald wanted to reflect his personality, the phase of the era he is living in, and personal life struggles into his works quite transparently. However, not using transparent expressions that everyone will notice. The one element that caught my eye was Fitzgerald's depiction of hair. I became curious about this if it could be considered as a writing tactic of his. To find this consistency, I use Conc as my method to find certain usage of hair color in the first and last novels of Fitzgerald. With Conc, I analyzed how hair was used in each novel and found a distinctive pattern based on its color. And this, I think, proves how he held his breath to discuss the possibly obvious or dull themes in his novels: love, success, failure, hatred, money, and the 1920s society itself aesthetically. First, I typed in hair to come up with the following results. In This Side of Paradise, I got 52 hits of hair. In Tenderest Night, I got 55 hits. After searching for keywords such as blonde, ed hair, haired, etc., there were distinct hair colors that Fitzgerald liked to use for certain characters. There are differences in the way how F. Scott Fitzgerald uses hair color to depict his characters. It is not based on a single purpose or as an unchanging imagery. It changes depending on how he wants the readers to perceive certain characters in the different novels, even if they are in similar themes. There is a noticeable preference of hair color that F. Scott Fitzgerald utilizes for his characters that are needed to be differ from others. Red or auburn hair is the protagonist that reflects himself. This is not just a coincidence considering that it appears in his initial and in his last works, and a comment that Edmund Wilson makes again. He says, "The second thing one should know about him is that Fitzgerald is partly Irish and that he brings both to life and to fiction certain qualities that are not Anglo-Saxon." So, in This Side of Paradise, the protagonist Amory is depicted as this. He was an auburn-haired boy with great, handsome eyes which he could grow up to in time, a facile, imaginative mind, and a taste for fancy dress. Dick Diver, the protagonist of The Tenderest Night, is depicted as this. Just a little, very handsome with reddish hair. She was eating ravenously. He's married, though. Another pattern I found with the depiction of hair color is hair color change. Along with his male protagonists, women characters are also a big element in his novels, mirroring his life affected by his wife Zelda. His women characters who are attractive and beautiful are mostly blonde. However, there are some women whose hair are depicted very differently. For example, Amory in Tender's Night, Amory in This Side of Paradise meets 4 women in the novel in total. Among the 3, Amory has short affairs with and leaves them because he realizes uselessness in the relationship or because of his high ego. These women are depicted like this. Amory was on fire to be a habitat for roof gardens to meet a girl who should look like that. Better, that very girl whose hair would be drenched with golden moonlight, while at his elbow sparkling wine was poured by an unintelligible waiter. Amory wasn't good enough for Clara. Clara of ripply golden hair, but then no man was. But all criticism of Rosalind ends in her beauty. There was that shade of glorious yellow hair, the desire to imitate which supports the dye industry. However, the last woman he encounters with gives him realization of life's meaning and a chance to look back at himself. Here, the depiction of hair changes. The woman is not merely a representation of external beauty. In fact, her hair color is not mentioned at all. "What color is your hair?" he asks intently. "It's bobbed, isn't it?" "Yes, it's bobbed. I don't know what color it is," she answered, musing. "So many men have asked me. It's medium, I suppose. No one ever looks long at my hair. I've got beautiful eyes, though, haven't I? I don't care what you say. I have beautiful eyes." The same tactics he used in Tender's Night too. Rosemary, an 18-year-old girl who has an affair with the male protagonistic Diver, is depicted as this. Her fine forehead sloped gently up to where her hair, bordering it like a memorial shield, burst into lovelocks and waves and curlicues of ash blonde and gold. Her cream-colored dress, alternately blue or gray as they walked, and her very blonde hair dazzled Dick. However, Dick Diver's wife Nicole, who suffers from extreme mental illness, knows about the affair but starts to love life herself and gets divorced with Dick. The way she is depicted is more intricate than that of This Side of Paradise because Nicole actually dyes her hair darker, but she is described as more beautiful, giving the reader the feeling that the male protagonist actually learned a life lesson. Her face was hard, almost stern, save for the soft gleam of piteous doubt that looked from her green eyes. Her once fair hair had darkened, but she was lovelier now at 24 than she had been at 18, when her hair was brighter than she. Nicole had been a beauty as a young girl, and she wouldn't be a beauty later when her skin stretched tight over her high cheekbones. The essential structure was there. She had been white Saxon blonde, but she was more beautiful now than that her hair had darkened than when it had been like a cloud, and more beautiful than she. Like this, we can see that the writers have their own way of writing and hints that are hidden for the reader to feel rather than to recognize immediately. Finding the ways of how other writers hold their breath too will lead us to be able to utilize amazing works as useful resources in the literary field. Thank you.